All right, so lab 2 in this class is dealing with mechanical, electrical, and plumbing submittals. So another one of the really important duties and responsibilities as any kind of management team for a construction project is dealing with submittals. Particularly when it comes to MEP stuff, it's really important as for the managers to take a look at all the equipment that's coming in, all the materials that are coming in, being that good source of checks and balances. But then not just tracking the submittals coming in, but also following through and making sure that whatever materials come to site are accurate. I can't tell you how many times we've had different subcontractors try to pull wool over the eyes by submitting one product and then trying to install others. So when you have a good quality control process through the submittal process, you can really help save your project quite a bit. It is a really important process. The one thing to understand too with this is because the management teams are not engineers, the review process is actually a little simpler, I think, in the MEPs than others. It's more of just checking through, making sure we have generally the right product. We have the submittal log all pulled up and accurate. We know what products we have coming through, and everything's on time. The lead times associated with those are accurate, and then we leave it up to the engineers to make sure that whatever is being submitted is accurate. So generally, when I go through a submittal process as a project manager, I didn't do it as a PM, but as like a PE or anything like that. Um, the review on these is a little bit more streamlined. It was just a general review, checking in a couple important things to make sure we're really talking about the right thing and it's tracking against the log pretty well. So a couple things to look through. I'll give you a quick example in a minute here, but this file right here is from CN251, which is our field ops class where we actually go into submittals. Um, I'm just using that as kind of like a another resource for you, just a reminder of like what submittals are, how to kind of review submittals and the specs and everything, how the specs are created based on different types of products and requirements, how submittal logs are created, different examples of them, some of the importances of the dates and everything. Because what we're going to be doing here for this assignment, I'm going to give you 6 different submittals that you're going to have to review, and you have to track them against a log that I've given you. So again, if you have any questions on this, please let me know, because submittals sometimes can be really tricky to understand, but other times if you've done them and you understand the purpose and concept, they might go kind of quick. Just another resource here for you to understand the importance of submittals and how to do submittals. But what we're going to get into is assignment A2, and here are all your assignment project documents. Like I mentioned, you have 6 different submittals to go through. So we have storm drainage piping, drinking fountains, hydronic piping, cabinet unit heaters, conductors and cables, and then wiring devices. So a couple plumbing, a couple mechanical, and a couple electrical for you to go through. You also have the submittal log and the assignments, instructions, and then a guide for how to fill in the submittal form. So the A2 assignment looks like this. I'll just walk it through really quickly so I can give you an example. Um, just again, a lot of what we do in this program is guided by our advisory committee, which is made up of 25 people from around the country, and they want to see more submittal review. And it's a good practice because it's how we actually really learn. At least for me, this is how I learned a lot about MEP systems in general, is just managing the submittal process. So early on, I was pretty fortunate. I got to work on one of the world's biggest children's hospitals, and I was in the MEP division, and I had to manage the entire submittal process and the Navisworks process too. So it was kind of like getting to see full circle how important all the products are, how the submittal process works, the importance of the submittal process, and just understanding how to track all the products that are coming in. So let's see. Anything up here? So the instructions really is you're going to do a couple things. You are going to take the 6 submittals that I've provided on Educat in that folder and the submittal log, and you're going to track the submittals in, right? So that's kind of step 1. And then you're going to also do a quick submittal review. So the documents that you're going to be using for this are listed right here. I'll pull up that submittal form cover instructions, which looks something like this. So this is what your submittal form copy is going to look like. So again, I just want to mention that this is a real project with a real contractor, the building that our program is housed in. So none of this stuff is to be shared anywhere. It's just for educational purposes only. And I do have my own markups, so they're not the actual final documents. They're just again, educational purposes. So what you're going to get for all of your um, submittals to review is this submittal form that you're going to have to fill in. So you're going to fill in the title, you're going to fill in your name here, what spec section we're dealing with, what type of submittal we're dealing with, right? So this is going to be like product data, shop drawing, stuff like that. What submittal number we have, so this is going to come from the log, and then what revision we have. So if it's the very first submittal from that type, it's always 0 is the revision number because we haven't had any revisions. The other thing you're going to have to do is, because the way this spec is written, your job as the contractor is only to review or approve. Quite honestly, you're pretty much just going to review them. You're not going to approve anything because it's out of your wheelhouse. You're not the engineer of record. You're going to put the same spec section as above because this is our submittal stamp. That's going to be you again here and who is signing this, and then what date. So what you're going to do here is copy the date that was submitted. And then down here, any comments that you might make. A lot of times, especially for like MEPs or structural drawings are another example too, where you're dealing with shops, you're mostly just reviewing them and sending them along. And any comments or any things that you see that may not exactly meet the spec requirements, I'd highly recommend just putting a note that says like AE to confirm. So using the cloud function on Bluebeam, if you have Bluebeam to use, or something similar with a note that can just say AE to confirm, or make along with whatever other note and why it's not specifically meeting the specs as you have found. So that's just a quick little cover sheet to sort of help you along, a little guide so you understand what to do on that first sheet. The other thing you have to pull up is the CETF plans and specs, because you're going to have to look through specification sections for sure whenever you're dealing with mechanical submittals. And then you're also, in a lot of situations, you're going to have to pull up schedules. So if it's like a mechanical, like a cabinet unit heater, for example, you'll probably going to have to look at what the requirements are in the mechanical schedules. So make sure to pull those up and use those as well. So here's the scenario. You are the project manager in charge of submittal review and tracking. Each of the submittals has been provided by a subcontractor on your project. You are receiving, or what you are receiving already has a submittal form attached to it, right? So in general, a subcontractor would be submitting to you. There would not be a submittal form your submittal form would not be on it, but what I'm giving you is that submittal form that I just walked you through. So you already have the submittal form attached, which is the first page. And step 1 is, when you take a look at that submittal, you're first going to have to track it in with the submittal log. So you're going to use the submittal log that I provided as well. It looks something like this. Okay, I've only given you the sections that are 20 through 28, just to keep it with the MEPs. So what your job is going to have to be is to fill out the section for just the 6 that I've provided for you for the submittals. Okay, so you're using the log to provide using the log provided to plug in the submittals you received in the right categories. You must fill in only the information for these categories. So there's description, revision, responsible contractor, which is the subcontracting company that sent you the submittal, who it's received from, so it's whatever the person's name is, the date that is submitted, which is, we're using the date that's provided in the submittal form, and then the date submitted to the design team. So for this one, we're going to use the day after it was submitted to you. So in general, this will be the day that you get the submittal from a subcontractor. You're going to review it. Maybe it's the same day, maybe it's the next day, maybe it's a week. You generally have whatever your specs say, but maybe it's up to a week or so for you to review submittals before you send them on to the design team. So those ones again would be way over to the right here. So I already have this stuff in for you. I have the title and I have the type, because I want you to make sure that at the beginning of a project, you would be submitting all this stuff and approving all this stuff to the architect, working through it to make sure these are all the products that they want. But what we would have to do then, once we get the submittals, we have to go through the description. I'll show you where that is in the specs. What revision, responsible contractor, received from, right? The date received, the due date, don't have to worry about. That's just generally something that we would have to put in there. But then the date submitted to the design team, which for you guys is going to be the date after. I already have different dates and stuff plugged in based on the specs, so you don't have to worry about that either. So just follow the instructions on that one. Okay, so the second step then, after you've gone through the submittal log with all 6 of those items, you want to take a look through the submittal review. So definitely need to use specs and plans for this, primarily the specs, but plans as necessary. You may have notes to take on there, but you may have nothing to take as well because there might not be any markups. You might be able to see it right away and be like, that's generally looks like the right product. And you would pass it along because, again, you're not the engineer. So don't look at this as being this really long thing. I would just want you to make sure you understand where to look for information and try to come up with some notes to clarify to make sure we have the right products in place. Okay, talked about the submittal cover form instructions. For any markups that you do make sure you mark them up in red. So on your submittal form, when you get that, make sure that all your writing is in red. If you're marking up things throughout the submittal, make sure those are in red, right? So again, you may or may not have any notes throughout the submittal. Some sheets might be pretty important to look through to create markups to indicate what products we're actually reviewing. This should be on the subcontractors, but they don't always mark up the items. So the manufacturers might just submit their generic product information, which could list a lot of different things on there. So what you're trying to do is find and make sure we have the right product per the specs. That's working with our submittal log. Okay, a couple important notes to consider when we're reviewing. Do we check both the specs and the plans, primarily the schedules, to determine compliance? Since we're not the engineer, again, your job is to confirm they submitted generally the right product, quantities, types, whatever that might be. So don't get too much into the weeds. That's their job to confirm it is the right thing based on their engineering design. And then make comments as you see fit, but do not get into too much detail, right? Quick little simple comments. And the final step, once you're all done, make sure you submit 7 different documents. All 6 of your submittals I want submitted separately. All you have to do for changing the title name is where the documents say student, just take your last name, replace it in there. In the submittal log then, just add your last name to the beginning of the document. Okay. Once you submit, you will see what the actual keys would look like and kind of what we're looking for. And then the general rubric. So since there's 6 to do, the submittal log will have 2 points per each submittal that are on there. So generally your accuracy of the submittal log within there. And then submittal review, again, 2 points for each, and then 1 point for properly submitting. I'm just going to pull up one really quick so you can see what we're looking at here. So the very first one that's listed in EduCat for you is storm drainage piping. So I'll do most of this one sort of together here just so you can see what we're looking at. And what this shows, I think this is the right one. Let's see here. Storm drainage piping. Okay, so I'm going to go into my spec sections, into the storm drainage piping, go right to the beginning so we can see it. So step 1 right off the bat here, this is what the subcontractor would be submitting you, and this is what you would have to fill in, right? So the title of this one would be storm drainage piping, your name, whatever spec section. So this spec section would be is listed up here, 221413, right? The type of submittal we're looking at is going to be product data, because what is necessary is product data for our action submittals. Okay, the number, we have to look at our submittal log. So going back down to 221413, right? So here's the submittal number, 221413-1, because there's only one submittal in that spec section. So this is the category that we're going to have to be filling in. Okay. And then revision will be 0, and then product description. So the product description, where we get this is out of our action submittals section. So for this one, we're talking product data for pipe, tube, fittings, and couplings. Okay, so that description is the same description that we would put in this spot right here. So it'd say product data for pipe, tube, what else did it say here? Fittings and couplings. Fittings and couplings. So that's also the same description we put in this spot. Then fill in the spec sections and all that stuff. After you're done, you can finish up this stamp here. Okay, so what we want to do next is kind of take a look through what the actual products are that we're submitting on. So what we have here are no hub, cast iron, soil pipe, and fittings. Manufacturer is Tyler. Okay, so now that we know we have product data coming for pipe, tube, fittings, and couplings, that's what we're looking at. Okay, the next step we would look at is in our products, right, what our manufacturers are. So in other Part 2 articles where titles below introduce list the following requirements apply to product selection. Okay, this part's not terribly pertinent to us, but this one is hubless. Okay, we're talking no hub, cast iron pipe and fittings, hubless, cast iron, soil pipe, and fittings. This is the section that we're looking at. So manufacturers right off the bat, we have Aneco Husky, Ferguson Enterprises, Ideal Trident, and Norma Group. So we have Tyler right off the bat. I would probably just make a quick little note on this and say, like, manufacturer not listed in specs AE to confirm, right? Just something simple like that, because again, that's just showing that we've reviewed it against everything. Now, the likelihood of them denying it is probably very low, especially if we meet all the generic standards. So the very first thing we would probably look at is what these testing standards are. So CISPI 301 for all hubless cast iron pipe and fittings. So where we would find that as we're going through our, we're not looking at PVC. Oh, I jumped ahead here. Hubless cast iron pipe. So pipe and fittings, ASTM A88 or CISP 301. So we have 301 and A88. So I would come through and I would just, I like this little counter function. We knock both those off the list. It meets both of those. And then we're talking gasket standards right here. So rubber gaskets for cast iron, soil pipe, and fittings. Where we'd find that is down in this section right here. We have description, stainless steel shield and stainless steel bands, tightening devices. Here's ASTM C564 for rubber sleeve with integral center pipe stop. So that's what we're talking about here is that ASTM standard. If you come down a little bit further under special pipe fittings and sleeve materials, you'll see that again where we have for cast iron soil pipes ASTM C 564 for rubber. So these are the products. So after that, quite honestly, I'd be pretty much done. I just look through, make sure that everything is submitted upon that we're hoping for and that we needed per the log, right? So right now we also have no hub couplings that are part of the same submittal. So I'd take a look through this again just to make sure that we meet. So reading through the description, it meets the same general standards. The neoprene sleeve sealing, we can look over here on the left where we have couplings. Let's see, non-pressure pipe couplings. What standards those guys would go with because our no hubs are non-pressurized. So we're not even looking at pressurized couplings or anything like that for this one. So, taking a look through again, we have now hangers and supports. So they also submit on this, which is all part of the same submittal for this one. I'm going to exit out of my counter if I can. Okay. So where we have hangers and supports are generally in our execution section because this is how we actually go and install them. So they're not necessarily products that are housing the system, it's the stuff that supports them, so it's part of installation processes. So if you look through this section, we're not talking joint construction, even though this would be a good place to actually look back and make sure, just confirm that however they have joints listed for hubless is accurate. Remember, we had CISPI 310. So we're meeting these general testing standards for it, and that's how we're installing. But hanger and support installation. So for this one, we have vertical pipe MSS type 8. Let's see, install following. Individual straight horizontal piping runs according to the following. So this is kind of what we're looking at with these ones. Um, so you just kind of read through and see what standards we're dealing with here. So for our approvals, kind of walk through, we have comply with federal specifications and then manufacturer standardization society, so MSS type 1. So these are our installation standards for anything that's 100 feet or less. So then at that point, it's up to the subcontractors as they're installing to confirm with these regulations, and that's what they're submitting on for this install. So this process then takes you into when the subs are also going to actually install the products, confirming that with your checks and balances that they're doing it per the standards and the requirements that are set forth in both the specs and whatever the testing standards organization is. So relatively, again, a little bit straightforward. It took maybe 5 minutes to walk through that. I anticipate if you've never done it before, it'll take probably a little bit longer to walk through it. If you look through all this stuff, you can find information on all the different sizes and then all the material sizes for all those different things, the different load ratings, all that stuff. But again, that's more for the engineers to confirm. You're just confirming that they give us the right product. These ones say Clevis hangers. We have Clevis hangers. We have the right standard testing procedures that are required in the spec. So for this one, I would say we're pretty good. I'd go through here and as I was finalizing this, I would just say reviewed comments to say, see comments as noted throughout submittal or something similar to that. And that's pretty much it. Pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Just, a really important process, and it also helps you learn how the plans and specs are put together. It helps you learn a lot more about what products are actually on your in your project. And as you're coming through here to finish up your submittal log, the responsible contractor on this one was DMI. It was obviously revision 0, like all of them. Received from, what name did I put on here? Authorized signature was John Doe. Okay, date submitted. We have to look back through here and say the date was 3/25/22. Okay, we can skip the due date. The date submitted to the design team would be the next day, so 3/26/22. And then the rest should populate automatically based on what the specs required. So when you're finishing up this sheet, you could put the next date so that 3/26/22 would go there. And you'll have to do that for the other ones too. So there's 6 of them to do. Again, just make sure you find the pertinent information, the most pertinent stuff. If there's any questions on it, please let me know. They can be confusing a little bit to figure out where is the right information to look at, especially once you start getting into schedules. So this one's obviously just pipe material, so we don't have to worry about schedules so much, but later on when you get into I think this one might be the fans, that's hydronic piping. One of them's a fan somewhere in here. Like that one, I would highly recommend taking a look at the schedule as well to confirm. But after that, make sure you submit your 7 documents, right? So all 6 of these marked up, and then your submittal log that's filled in with the 6 submittals, and turn them in according to the instructions. And if you have any questions, please let me know.